Well, welcome again this morning to C.A.R.s, Coffee and Christ. It is the podcast here at Automotive Royale here in Mounds, Oklahoma. My name is Ross Turner. I am the host here in the chaplain at C.A.R. And we have a special episode today that we've been meaning to do for a while and are finally able to do it this morning. And we want to talk about women working in male-dominated vocations. We want to discuss both some of the challenges of that. We're going to hear that at the beginning of the episode, but also some of the encouragements about pursuing a career in these historically male-oriented fields as women, but also encouragements from men as well. So with me today, we have truly a full house. There's a lot of caffeine here, and I think we're about as ready to go as we can be. So I'll start with our ladies. We have Leanne Hodges over there on my far side there, and she's jumping in with us today as a special guest of ours. Of course, we all know Abigail King, who is our COO and our co-founder, co-owner of C.A.R. We also have Ren Steckler with us today, and she's a first-time guest with us and works in our shop with us as well, and we're going to get to hear from her prominently as well, and some of the other typical cast of characters. You don't need to be introduced to them, but I'm going to do it anyway. We got Chris LaFon on the far end there, works as one of our techs, Ray Lawson, our business manager, and then Joshua King, our CEO and our co-founder, co-owner with us. So welcome, everyone. Thanks for coming. I know it's a Friday, but hey, at least it's Friday, and we're all together, and we're going to get to talk about, I think, a wonderful subject, very relevant for our world, very helpful, I think, for people, and important for us as, a diverse group of male and female people working in this industry together. So I thought we'd start with our ladies. And ladies, we're talking about entering into male-oriented fields today. So I thought it would be good for you to start us off by saying, hey, which profession or professions did you choose to work in that were kind of, all the guys are there, right? And what were some of the factors that led you to doing that? Now, it might have been very, thought out. It might have just kind of fallen in your lap. I'm not sure what it was. We'd love to hear your story about that. So just for the listener, reintroduce your name, and then you can kind of take it from there. Share your story. What are some of the factors that led you to choosing, whether it's the automotive industry, the construction industry, something else? Well, I'd love to share it. So who wants to start?
I'll start.
Okay, here we go.
My first job outside of college was in a male-dominated field, and I didn't realize it would be. I basically didn't know what I wanted to do after college. I had a psychology degree, bachelor's degree, and did not want to get my master's at the time. And so I had a bunch of friends working in insurance. So I worked for a big insurance company and was an adjuster. Yeah. And for the majority of my 10-year career, I was working on the property side. Mm-hmm. And while the adjusters that I worked with, it was probably half and half, female, male. But when I would go out to inspections, I was always meeting men. And it was always surprising to them that here's a 5'2" female going up, climbing on a roof, or, looking under crawl spaces or whatever. I rarely met a female contractor, rarely met a female plumber or, fire and water restoration employee or anything. And so it was male dominated in that regard. Yeah. So having to kind of combat that, automatically having my expertise or knowledge questioned without even opening my mouth. Yeah. And I know some of that probably would be bias against insurance companies, but then having that added bias of, oh, you're a female as well. Of course, you're not going to know what I know because I've been in this field for 30 plus years and, So that was always a little bit of a challenge. And then I basically took, a hiatus from working outside the home and then enter into another male-dominated field, working in the automotive industry. But this experience is a lot different, and it may be because of the culture that we're creating here. Yeah. And I think it's any guy that I've interacted with here in the shop has been very encouraging. And like when I have the questions, because I'm not an expert, right? It's everybody's like, oh yeah, I'll explain this to you. And not in a demeaning way. In a, oh, you want to learn? Okay, I'll tell you. Which has been really nice, really refreshing. So yeah, that's been my experience.
That's great, Abby. Thanks for sharing that. So what would you say were like maybe some of the main factors that led you to choose those vocations in your, was it just kind of like, hey, this is the next step, or this is something I've planned out? What was the...
No, insurance, it was definitely just, I had friends that were working there. I figured, working with them would be fun. I don't know many people that go into the industry, the insurance industry, with that being their initial goal. It was, hey, I'm out of college and I need to pay bills. That was my reasoning there. And then, of course, I mean, starting this company, it was me coming alongside Joshua and supporting his dream, and also enjoying, building on my Jeep and enjoying that and being like, okay, like this field, I think I'll be able to enjoy it. Yeah.
This is great. That's helpful, Abby. Thanks for sharing that. That's encouraging, and it's good to know kind of the reasoning or the circumstances that led to those things too. But I understand the insurance part too. I get that. So, ladies, who else wants to go? Who else wants
to go?
Leanne, go ahead.
Yeah. So my name is Leanne Hodges, and I live in a small town here in Oklahoma. And my background in the male-dominant field started when I was very young. And my first job, I worked at Ag Solutions out of Chickasha, and we sold farming equipment to farmers all over the United States. And so I never spoke to a woman once on the phone at that position. It was male-dominant 100%. And that just kind of kept rolling into, different careers. And eventually I landed in a construction field, doing horizontal directional drilling and auger boring and trenching, and so that was 100% a male dominant field. The owner of the company was she was women owned, and so I learned so much from her. I mean, everything. She has 2 master's degrees and runs 2 companies full time, and I just kind of took that experience and ran with it, and I learned so much, and it rolled into HR and compliance and safety, and I've taken multiple OSHA 30 classes and traveled to Texas and took it was a 3-day Texas DOT safety planning. And there was 3 women in that class with 50 men. And I'd never done traffic planning whatsoever, didn't know anything about it. And I took the class, made 100, got 2 job offers while I was there. And I turned them down because traffic planning is not a thing. That's not enjoyable at all. But so it's you just got to put yourself out there and take the risk and trust in yourself and and have confidence. That's the biggest thing, is being able to walk into a room that's full of men that they know everything in that industry, and you got to learn and you got to soak it all in and just enjoy the ride, because it's something to be in that position, and and to walk into a room and be able to hold your head high and say, hey, I'm here to prove that I can do whatever you can do and probably better. So
what led you initially to kind of jumping into those fields? What was the background of that?
It was pretty much the same thing. I was, a young mom. I had my boys at 16 and 18 years old. I got my GED. I didn't finish high school. And so I met my husband, and he was in auto body. And so, he's a car guy. And so I just I fell in love with that as well. And but learning from Kelly, at Cooper Resources, she molded me into that person, and she gave me the confidence that I needed, to even come on and, hopefully, roll into something else.
That's great. So the only other question, Leanne, is the traffic control industry or whatever, is that a more purposeful industry than insurance? really choose to do that?
So it wasn't traffic planning. We were doing horizontal directional drilling for pipeline, oil, and gas. And so I would travel to New Mexico, West Texas, and be on a job site, a pipeline job site, and I never knew that was in my, in my future, thinking about that's not what I was going to be doing, but I really enjoyed it. It was a wonderful time in my life, and I learned so much.
Thank you so much, Leanne. That's neat to hear kind of how the trajectory of all those things, and your husband being a car guy as well. Seems like it was in the cards for your life. Very much like no matter where you turned.
Right.
Pretty awesome. Rain, well, you're last. You jump in there.
Hi, I'm Rain. So I started my whole working career actually working at O'Reilly Auto Parts. I've always kind of knew I wanted to be in the automotive field. I'm kind of going backwards, but my grandpa got me really inspired. And I never knew girls didn't work on cars because he was a lead mechanic who would hire female mechanics. And I was like, girls work on cars. This is fun. This is cool. And so I started working at O'Reilly's, and I was kind of like, well, I want to do everything about cars. And there's a lot to do with cars. You got the mechanical side, you got paint and body side, you got all that. So I was like, I don't know exactly what I want to do, but I want to build and restore muscle cars and hot rods. I know that much. I just don't know what aspect of that I want to do yet. So I went to college for basic maintenance and light repair. And my instructor at the time wanted me to work for Jaguar, and I was like, I don't really want to work on fancy new cars. I was like, that's super cool, and this is a super awesome opportunity, but I'm like, that's not exactly what I want to do. So I kept working at O'Reilly's, kept going to school. I had a super awesome opportunity to be a part of the all-female build for SEMA a few years ago, or I guess now it's almost a decade ago. And I was surrounded by females then, which was a whole different world than what I was used to. I was like, wait a second, I know girls work on cars, but I didn't know that this many girls worked on cars. This is really cool. So I was able to there were welders there were paint and body girls there were mechanics there. I came back after that experience, and my grandpa was like, if you enjoy what you do for a living, you'll never work a day in your life. And so I was like, okay, well, I enjoy taking something that someone, has poured their whole life into and turning it into their dream car, their, what they aspire it to be. And then you're essentially making people's dreams come true. But also I enjoy the creativeness and getting able to express myself with, their cars, even if it's not, oh, well, I painted this color instead of that color, but hey, it looks good that color too, So I've always really enjoyed working on cars. It's always it builds such a big community. You can connect in different ways. It isn't just cars. You can go to motorcycles, four-wheelers. You can, there's all sorts of different things that it could take you. And I think I've pretty much been in paint and body but restoration side since I've pretty much started my career. And there's been, I could probably count on both hands how many females I've had the pleasure of working with. But it's cool because the more I've progressed throughout my years, I've met more females, worked with more females. This is the first female boss I've actually really had, which I think is awesome. It's a huge inspiration seeing someone who actually works on their car too, because it's oh man, she gets it. We gotta think smarter, not harder sometimes. We gotta use a lot of leverage sometimes because we don't just have brute strength sometimes. So it's really cool to get to learn from other people and everything like that. So I try and take it for what it is. But I haven't had any negative experiences with males in the industry. There's always people stuck in their ways, and they always want to, help out. They almost take you in like a little sister kind of thing, and that's always been a really cool.
That's awesome. I love hearing your story and your positive thought on it too, and it's seemed like your grandfather was the real focal point of entering in and getting involved and passing on that, and that's a huge part of kind of what we're about here too, that kind of generational passing on and investment in one another. So really cool hearing yours too, and how diverse the three of you stories are in a lot of ways too. So wonderful, y'all. But maybe switching gears now a little bit, and guys, you're welcome to jump in and share here. But what do you think is the most difficult part of putting these things together? Women coming into these kind of fields, there are challenges. I mean, there really are, and I think they're typically more known than the encouragements. Right. And so what might be in your mind the biggest challenge that sticks out in trying to, might not just be in one field, but just in general in man-oriented fields like these? What's really the hardest part of doing that? Of maybe not just entering in, but continuing in that too. And so, man, you obviously can share about that too from your perspective as well, but we'd love to hear the ladies especially on this. So who wants to jump in for that question?
Definitely.
Yeah.
So I would say the most difficult thing is proving yourself.
Yeah.
Proving your talents, proving your knowledge, being able to show that you know what you're talking about and then trust you with your word, and so I think that would be the biggest thing, is just being able to prove it.
The proving piece.
Yes, and continuing to prove it.
Continuing
you might show your worth and yourself to this person, but you walk in to the next room and you got to do it all over again because they just don't know. And so it's the constant pressure and constant knowing and proving yourself.
Yeah, that's great. And anyone else?
I think it's kind of a pro and con. Same thing is, I think especially us, we're smaller in stature, right? So I'm sure you guys have experienced this as well. But like Rain said, no, we can do things. We are capable to do things physically. But if you're around guys that are bigger, having them step in and be like, oh, no, I could do that for you or whatever. It's the con is, no, we can do it ourselves.
Yeah.
We work smarter, not harder. Right? But then the pro of that is something that me and Joshua have said. It's like, if I'm here at the shop and anyone were to come in and start bothering me, I am confident that there is a building full of men that would be like, no.
Definitely.
They're to protect you as well. So it's like, I will take your strong, capable selves and utilize you that way as well.
It's a great answer. It's like sometimes good, sometimes not good, but that's awesome.
Yeah. One of the things I think that used to be a problem, and I'm in an industry that I think is predominantly men as well, in tech and sales, or at least when I started, it was 2 and 50, similar stuff, and I watched these awesome women that I think were some of the best salespeople I've ever met in my life. Struggle with stuff, right? And I'll give you a couple of stories, and it was what I think can help is just much better leaders. I think a lot of the failure comes from the leadership actually, in setting the culture or making decisions. One of the big hardships I saw was unequal pay, which I think has been leveled off a lot in recent years. But back in the day, when I first became a manager, I'm like, what is going on? Why are these so different? And so I just spent the first few years bringing people up to level. Right? That was a big problem just in the industry. And then I think also kind of the old mentalities or, cheap comments. A great story at one time there was a presentation and an award, and there was some guy on the stand that was like, hey, I'm going to give this the most attractive, salesperson in the state. And so immediately, without skipping a beat, her boss stood up and accepted the award on her behalf and goes, oh, thank you. And he gets up and he steps in, and it was just so witty and so smart. And it was perfect, right? Because it just, I think leaders need to be better, right, at these types of things, and setting the culture and setting the expectations, and I've seen a few really great ones, right? And I've seen a better shift, I think, in those unequal measures that are, not really merited, because again, that sales rep was, top 1% of my company when I was working with her. So it's those things, don't make a lot of sense.
That's great, Joshua. Yeah, how you're saying inequality in pay and just acceptance, I think, in my view, my experience has been the same way. It's there's just this perception that's wrong, that there should be some inequality, or there's just kind of a default to some kind of inequality. Might even not be very thoughtful. It's just that's just kind of something accepted, and I think that seems to be from my perspective, just the inequality perspective that most men have adopted, I think, and probably the culture has kind of passed on, I think, too. So, and then it shows up in situations like, something that's supposed to be lighthearted even kind of comes through there as well. Anyone else? What might be the biggest challenge that you've perceived to kind of meshing male and females together in kind of more male-dominated fields?
Well, as a person that's been in leadership most of my life, in different roles, have always been primarily male-dominated fields. I mean, it's either been automotive or production or whatever it is. I say it's just something that it's different methods or different approaches to dealing with individuals. As men, as Abby and Rain touched on it, we're always kind of looked at as, kind of the brute strength kind of guys. For something, a heavy task and needs to be done, you go get the guys, But what people in leadership roles, they have to understand the capabilities of the person that they have, and you utilize that capability that they have to its fullest. And what I've found is no matter what role it is, when I was in production manager, I had female welders that were on the line. I had female assemblers. As I've been in the automotive paint and body side, custom side, I worked with Rain at a different location. There were multiple females, that worked at that location alongside her. And what I found is females in the workplace, whether it's primarily male-dominated or not, they bring an aspect to the job that we don't have as men.
Yeah.
And a lot of that is that it's that attention to detail. It's that organization. It's there's so many strong points. It's the relational side of things. Whereas two guys, whenever there's a conflict, they're going to handle it a certain way. And if there's a male and a female involved in that conflict, then the female's going to handle it differently than what the male's going to handle it, which typically is, in most cases, a more level-headed side of the situation.
Typically works out better.
Right. So, for me, other than whenever I've had situations where I've worked where the particular female with a particular mindset throws out what we call, the female card. Whereas at this point, there's a certain amount of entitlement or something that goes along with that. At least that's in their mind, their expectation. I have never really experienced a lot of cons as far as it goes with working with females.
Yeah.
But I don't say I treat females any differently than I do males in the workforce. But if there was a challenge, it would be whenever there are things that require reprimand or repercussion. But I've found that in those particular cases, females will take things a little more personal.
Yeah.
And I think that's because there is an overly sense, not a negative sense, but an overly sense of caring.
Yeah, there was more care there.
Yeah. Whereas, you bring some of the guys in, you're like, and you say something to them about what's going on, and they're just like, whatever, don't care.
Yeah. Yeah, men are more compartmental thinkers.
Right.
I think that's why, whereas women, as they say, everything's intertwined, and so
right.
So men can say, I don't care about that. I'll just put that in that drawer.
Right.
Like that's how men think. Like that's it's like what I really think about is this drawer right here. Who cares about that drawer? Like that's how men think. So it's more of a thinking pattern and a relating pattern.
Yeah.
And I've had tons of female bosses in my life, and all of them would ask me when they hired me, like, "How do you feel working for a female boss?" I'm like, "That sounds awesome," because typically they'll communicate to you. Whereas men, they're like, "You understand me, right?" That was not talked about. It just looked at you. I'm not kidding. It's a telepathy thing.
Yeah.
There's very little communication. There's very little follow up. There's just kind of passing by and a meeting here and there. And, so there's a lot of strengths, like you're saying, Ray, really more than like this, from a male standpoint of like the challenges. I think there's a lot of strengths and it's a welcome thing. But yeah, there are, from a women's standpoint, there are a lot of challenges. And there's a lot of less obvious ones too. I'd love to ask kind of what you think of maybe some less obvious challenges, maybe not the big ones, but some things that might kind of go under the radar too. Ladies, what do you think? What might be some things that are, when you're in the industries that you're working in, what might be some less obvious things that are a little difficult to navigate as well?
I think one of them being that because women are typically more nurturing than men, getting that unspoken role of mother hen
Yeah.
or maid.
Yeah. Yes.
You know, of, oh, well, because the men just aren't thinking about certain things or seeing certain things that the woman would, it's, oh, is that something that I then have to, you know, take care of?
Yeah.
Just because they just don't see it or they don't care, but then it does matter to the woman, right? And then you get into that really awkward position of feeling like you're, you know, you have extra children.
Yeah. And you get kind of pushed in that role.
Yeah.
Kind of asked in a way indirectly to accept that role.
Right.
I think that also comes back to leadership, to recognize that, hey, someone's carrying the load in a direction that they shouldn't be. And I think we've said it here, is like, hey, buck up. Time to clean up the shop, time to do stuff, time to do this. You know, like, I'm seeing them clean up, which is identifying the problem, but it's not their responsibility, right? And so just, I think, again, that comes back to good leaders.
Yeah. Ladies, anyone else? What might be kind of some less obvious challenges?
I would like to say unwanted attention.
Yeah.
You know, flirting on the phone. You know, if you have a male and male, you know, you're calling for a part, that guy, if you're a guy on the phone, he's probably not going to hit on you, you know, or flirt with you or something like that. But because you're in a woman in a male-dominated field, it's, you know, and that it comes and it's out of nowhere.
Yeah.
I mean, there's been times I'm walking, you know, on a job site and I have whistles coming at me and, you know, and cat calls. And it's like, if I was a man walking down this job site, you wouldn't be yelling at me like that.
You would end in
know?
a different kind of
and it's a respect thing. And it's, and it's not talked about, you know, it's kind of like, oh, that's just what guys do. And that's just swept under the rug. And it's, you know, and it's something that's very common, and, you know, and so it's something that needs to be brought to attention and addressed. And unfortunately, it's most women in those fields, if it's brought up, you know, it's not addressed correctly, you know, and so it's just kind of just put in the closet and, oh, it's okay. And, you know, and so I think that's a big one that really is something that could be further, you know, progress and brought to attention more.
That's great. And and again, there's probably for some people that might be the biggest challenge for them, like you're bringing out, you know. And I mean, I've been in many situations that where I wasn't working for in the ministry, but I was working other work, especially in restaurant management. I was in a lot of restaurant management work, and I would always have people that would want a woman to serve them, and I would say, no, you're going to have the one assign you. You know, like they were always kind of doing that to objectify women and things, and I would have to make sure that would not happen.
Definitely.
And most of the servers you had were females, so you have to kind of be careful about that. And like Josh saying, like you have to protect that to make sure that there's not this undue pressure or attention upon women, and that's somehow associated with their job. You know, is really problematic. Yeah, that's great.
Well, I was going to say, I think with what she said about taking, you know, if you have a woman in your field, take her in, you know, protect her, you know, treat her as your sister, you know, and because there's, for every one guy that's protecting her, there's probably 20 that's, you know, a predator and wanting attention from her. And so, I mean, that's the best thing is just
that's really helpful.
Take her under your wing and protect her.
I think, you know, like we just got to remember we're all image bearers and there's respect. You know, we have a slogan here. It's Cross Automotive Royale. And the Royale is to treat everyone as a royal member of a household. So, you know, treat everyone as royalty is a phrase that we have here.
Right.
And you just got to have that kind of honor to people, right? And restore that to people and just have that respect. But in those scenarios, I think the thing when that shifted for me was when I had a daughter and you're like, okay, everything floods in about the realities around that. And then you start really empathizing and understanding it a lot better from a protective standpoint. I think that's where that comes in, especially those that have daughters that understand, oh no, like, and then just like the rest of your coworkers kind of fall into that category of protection and making sure and respect that just ushers in a lot, you know, more realistically, I think, in your own heart.
Yeah. Anything you want to share about maybe some less obvious challenges?
Nothing that I've personally dealt with, but I've witnessed. Sometimes there's like a ageism.
Yeah. Like
there's that older guy in the shop who's really stuck in his ways unless you do exactly as he says, even if he's not your boss.
Yeah.
You know, you're gonna get yelled at, you're gonna be called some not so nice names sometimes, and then like, you know, if you do bring that concern to someone up higher up and they're like, well, that's old man Jim, you
That's
know,
right.
like that's
The old man.
like just you know,
It's so true though. It's
Not only is he a man, he's an old one.
like, well, and it's usually the guys who've been in there longer than twice my age, you know, and I'm like, oh, hey, you know to just smile, say good morning, even if he's grumbling over there, you know, you're like, okay, good morning.
Well, I like how you bring that out, Rain, because there is not just the challenge of it being a man, but being an older man as well. And there's, I mean, again, just for being older might not be how good they are at something, but and there's a little bit of a bias towards that. And that, I'll be honest, there's less of that towards a younger man, for sure. You know, even though there's still a little bit of bias, of course, just for the age. And there's some due respect there for sure. But there's a sense of just like bias towards that. But it's very challenging for a woman to come up against that, for sure. And I think you bring that out. There's just kind of this accepted, perceptive kind of view of like the worth factor is so disparaging there. I agree.
Yeah.
That's important to bring out. Yeah.
Well, because I don't know off the top of my head if there's a female equivalent for the good old boys.
That's right.
Like, right? We all know what the good old boys
Maybe a
are.
Rosie, but I mean,
They're
how many
excellent.
Rosies are
You're
there?
right. You're
Like,
absolutely right. There is.
you don't.
maybe in Korea.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, Korean
It's a
moms
culture
are pretty.
I was
thing.
gonna say
They're
maybe
pretty
in
Yes.
certain cultures.
Yes,
they are.
culture.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're in a
But
different
not,
culture.
Yeah.
but yeah, here it's like,
Right.
you got the grumpy old man,
That's right.
or, you know, but.
That's right.
I'm
that's
not
a good
sure where
point.
you guys are going with this grumpy old man thing, this old age thing. But
No, you're jolly old Roger.
Also,
I don't think you're the grumpy old.
when Rain started talking about the old man, I thought, man, she's gonna call me out by name. Watch this.
the old man, also known as Ray.
Yeah.
That's a generational thing.
Yeah.
That's the way that they were
Yeah.
brought up.
Exactly.
You know? And,
Yes.
Yeah.
you know, if you have a mechanic that he's around when the cars were just built, you know, and that was very uncommon
Sold
to
at
have
cars.
a mechanic, you know, in that
Yeah.
industry, or
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
and it's females taking that role and replacing the male in those fields, you know, and that it's a threat,
For
you
sure.
know, coming in, and you know, and they're not used to that. If they're you know up in age, that's something new, and the world is constantly changing and it's evolving, and not only do women have to, you know, fight for their spot in a male dominant field, but now we have AI that's coming in, you know, and that kind of takes that organizational piece that men usually look for women in an office. It takes it out of there, because now all they need to do is go into AI and say, hey, build me this spreadsheet with this information.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, that kind of takes the women out of that piece as well. And so not only are we fighting men in this industry, in this world, now we're fighting computers.
Yeah.
And so
Those are some really good points, y'all. And again, some ways to understand like common perceptions that are just passed on that are, I think, just really problematic, but also just like, you know, what men look to women for in those fields are sometimes problematic too, even though they might be more gifted in those areas as well. Well, I thought we could finish by sharing what God's word has to say about the encouragement he has for women in work. I thought it'd be really encouraging to hear this. Because it's not talked about very, very often. And as the husband of a very professional wife, you know, I've always believed strongly that, you know, the Lord wants us to use all of our gifts for his glory, and we don't need to put a cap on that. And it's important for us to encourage each other. So I love how God's word encourages us here. And there's the famous kind of slogan of the Proverbs 31 woman. We need to kind of fill that out a little bit more. And it looks a little bit more than just housekeeping, okay? And just piety, okay? It looks a lot more than that. Here's what it says in Proverbs 31. It says, she rises while it is yet night. I think Abigail just did that. And provides food for her household, portions for her maidens. So she has servants, apparently, here. She considers a field and buys it. With the fruit of her hands, she plants a vineyard. She dresses herself with strength. She makes her arms strong. That sounds more like a guy, but it says that she's one that does this. She perceives that her merchandise is profitable, and her lamp does not go out at night. It sounds like a hardworking woman, and who's industrious, profitable, strong, to some level even independent. So again, this is ancient culture here. So it shows the diversity of how a woman is to be perceived in culture even then. And it's helpful for us to see that the Bible is not describing a woman, but prescribing here how a woman should engage work, which is helpful because there's a lot of things in the Bible that are just descriptive that are not meant to be imitated, right? Sinful people, things like that. But here it's, hey, this is how a woman should consider life. So, ladies, what might be some encouragements that you might give to other women listening, and just obviously to industries that you're working in, of how to be industrious, of how to make a vocation in these fields, of how to enter in and continue to thrive in challenging environments at times that might not be set for your success, right? But the Bible wants you to be industrious and profitable in these ways. So how would you encourage other women and also encourage people in the industry like us to consider that? What would you say?
What I think is vital for a woman to recognize is the difference that God made between male and female, right? There is a reason why men and women are so different, and they are very complementary towards each other. And so I think recognizing the special gifts that God has placed in you as a woman and letting those shine forth, not seeing them as a weakness, not seeing as different being bad, but recognizing what is in me that these men don't have, that I could make this environment better, right? What is the role that I could place that they would not be able to fill? And stepping into that, and like you said, stepping in with confidence, stepping in with strength, and really utilizing that.
That's great. I mean, kind of understanding how your role complements your environment, not necessarily threatens it or takes something away, but really blesses it, right? And that's such a wonderful, mature way of thinking about how to enter in to something that might not be kind of as welcoming initially. I love hearing that. That's a great perspective. Anyone else?
Yeah, definitely. So the confidence, I mean, trusting in yourself, in your faith, knowing that no matter what, that God's behind you and you can do all things. And so, just have confidence, walk in there with a big smile on your face and just blow them away.
Yeah. So that confidence is saying, I know who I am. I know why I'm here.
Definitely.
Right. And it's not a handout. I've earned that. Sometimes that's a hard thing to continue that.
Oh, definitely.
Like you're saying earlier, like it's a constant proving.
It is.
And that's a sad reality. But I think continuing to build that confidence, and a lot of times it will bless people that have less confidence, males included, in that area too. When women's, because I think the older men become, the more they start to appreciate people that have had to overcome things, and it demands respect. I think it's wonderful. And it's a great perspective, and to really bring that regularly is important. That's great. Anyone else to share? Rain, you want to share?
So I guess if you enjoy doing something, if it's like a passion you have, if it's a dream you have, you should go for it. And I mean, if you're gonna have people telling you can't do it, but it's not their dream. It's your dream, and so like they're not living your life. You know, you gotta live for you, and you gotta enjoy our very short time we have here. So just kind of following what makes you happy at the end of the day.
Josh?
And I'll just add on, today my daughter asked me, what both of my kids were saying, well, maybe I want to work at C.A.R.s one day, right? And I love that, first of all. But then secondarily, my daughter asked me, what should I do? And my response to her was, anything you want, right? Anything you want. What are you passionate about? That's right. Kind of what you were saying, Ryan. And I think that just as an encouragement, as a leader, and I've seen in this industry, now my team is about half women, half men. And the balance it creates in strength. Men lack a lot, and and there are things that women lack. And there's this blending of a team that you need certain elements to level themselves out so that things operate in a much better manner as a whole. And women see these different things that men can't see, both creatively, I think very much in creatively, and are willing to take more risk in doing something new. And there's a lot of true value I've seen in perspective. And I think that I've learned that over the years just by watching people to see that, man, you need a mix, you need a blend. And I think that because you have that blend, you'll put out, whether it's a product like a car, you'll put out a much better car.
Yeah.
You'll actually surprise people more, right? Which is really great. And I think you'll end up with a better balance where there's not these like apparent weaknesses. And I think that can come from like a completely male-dominated thing. Like men are just going to put huge engines in vehicles, and that's going to be about the thing they care about, and everything else becomes an afterthought. Versus the stuff you're seeing at SEMA, I think comes out from a blended view, right? Like some of this stuff, either a lot of years of experience, or you could get there a lot quicker with a balanced team.
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah, I think that the whole old school mentality, like you had mentioned, Leanne, about just how people thought. Men are stronger, women are weaker. You have the strengths and your weaknesses. I think as a leader, you have to go into that with the approach that there really should be, and there can't be a gender separation. There can't be a expectation for a male in a role and an expectation for a female in the same role, and those expectations be different because of their gender. And what I have found is that over time, when I've been in that situation, whenever you give an assignment to whoever, whether it's male or female, what I have found is that 90% of the time, in all reality, the female employee will excel in that situation, even if it's something that's difficult for them. Whereas, a male will go into that and be like, okay, well, this is a remedial job that he's asking me to do, as opposed to something that is fulfilling. And it's that achievement that I have found out. I've had female welders that would weld circles around the male welders on my weld lines.
Yeah.
And they both had the same schooling, they both had the same education, similar experience. It seems to me that especially in male-dominated industries, females in those industries are way more driven.
Determined.
Yes. They're way more driven. They have a mindset of, I am going to do this, even though I may be seen as the underdog.
Well, that's
I love that. I've only had one negative experience working as a female in a male dominated industry, and that's whenever that female was my boss, and she was in a situation where she had something to prove, and it was on a negative side. Other than that, any other interactions that I've had with females in the male dominated, I've always had great success with that situation.
Well, that's what you're seeing in that Proverbs 31. You're seeing the tenacity. You're seeing the determination. It's, I'm not going to be held back. I'm going to wake up early. I'm going to stay out late. I'm going to utilize the team that I have around me. It's not just being a shrinking violet.
That's right.
It is actually working very hard and using the gifts that you have.
A great picture of this is our enemies in World War II cite our production of World War II to be our primary reason the Americans won the war in the Allies. The Americans outproduced everyone in Germany. They said it was like every 10 minutes a new car was rolling off the line, or a bomber or something like that. And let's not forget who was in those factories.
That's right.
The men had left the war, and women built all that.
That's right.
They outproduced the world and won that war and defeated
really
evil that way. And I think that's really important to remember.
Well, y'all, it's been a really encouraging and I think really fruitful conversation, and it's a blessing to hear everyone's perspectives about this. I'll kind of finish by saying I love how Josh, you shared how your daughter wanted to say, hey, I wanted to do this as my future and whatnot. I had the same experience with my daughter, who's 10 now, and she said, Daddy, you're a preacher, you do this. I want to do that when I grow up. And I thought to myself, I was in a denomination at the time that would say, well, you will not be doing that. But I think I thought to myself and said, last time I checked, that the Spirit's not given differently to women and men that are believers. And the reality is there is an order to that. I don't want to miss that. But there is also this reality that gifting is not gender specific. And, if the Lord wants to call, like he calls it Deborah in the Old Testament, he calls, people in Acts, the reality, he'll call who he wants to call. So the reality is, I think, encouraging women into where God has for them is very important. Now, again, I don't want to say that it might not just be to the home. That's a very blessed thing. That might be the primary calling and the main focus. And that's not something to say that we want to diminish that. We want to encourage that too. But it's more of like, what has God called the woman to? What is he calling them to do? It might be both. It might just be one, in the home. But we want to see, hey, God is doing this. Let's encourage that, right? Instead of saying, no, in our culture, you really have three options, and instead asking God for what that would be, I think is important. And also being guys, I love how much you all have shared, men, about how to encourage and welcome the women into our fields and to try to be a blessing to them. And I think that's a wonderful case of also the leadership we have here as well. That's encouraging to hear, because I haven't had a whole lot of negative experiences myself, but I've heard a lot about them in my life. And so it's a blessing to be more on the positive side than on the negative one. So, well, everyone, thanks again for coming this morning. And listeners, again, we always want to encourage you to go to our website, crossautomotiveroyale.com. If you have inquiries about our business, about opportunities to partner with us when it comes to building vehicles, restoring them, or just getting your fresh coat of paint put on your vehicle, or ministry partnerships. We have a car donation program, a car clinic that we want to care for you, or just to have like-mindedness in ministry and to do that together. Go online and check that out. Until next time, signing off.